Today we'll go over the stories of two men living completely different lives but facing two terrifyingly similar fates. One, a father on an ordinary night out, relying on technology to guide him home. The other, an adventurer chasing the edge of human endurance across one of the deadliest stretches of ocean on Earth. Their stories may seem worlds apart, but both end in the kind of tragedy that leaves more questions than answers. It was late September 2022 in Hickory, North Carolina. The air was heavy with that early autumn crispness, the kind that whispers that summer is gone, but winter hasn't quite woken up yet. For 47-year-old Phil Paxson, it had been a long day. He had just celebrated his daughter's ninth birthday at a friend's house. The party had run late, and by the time that Phil finished cleaning and packing everything up, it was already pitch black outside. The streets were empty, the kind of quiet that's both peaceful and eerie. And Philip, a husband, father of two, and Navy veteran, was in no rush. He was driving his Jeep Gladiator, a sturdy, capable truck that could handle almost anything the road threw at it. He'd driven these rural roads before, but tonight he wasn't entirely sure of the quickest way home. So, he decided to pull out his phone and open Google Maps. Now, for most of us, this is a routine as buckling a seatbelt. You punch in your destination and you trust the calm voice that tells you where to turn. After several minutes into the journey, Google Maps suggested a route that wasn't the one that he normally took. It looked fine on the screen. A few back roads, nothing unusual. It estimated that it would save him a couple minutes, and so, without hesitation, Phil followed it. The night was moonless, the road winding and dimly lit. Street lamps gave way to stretches of pure darkness. Trees loomed on either side like black walls, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Phil's headlights carved two narrow tunnels of light ahead of him, but otherwise he was surrounded by shadow. As he followed the route, Google Maps guided him through turns that felt more and more unfamiliar. Still, there was no reason to doubt it. Then the calm voice announced that in 600 feet he should continue straight. He approached an intersection when the asphalt began to look more worn. There were no streetlights, no warning signs, just the hum of his tires against the road. Now, to understand what happens next, we have to go back 9 years before Phil's journey through this stretch of road. In 2013, a powerful storm had surged through this town and flooding had destroyed many of the infrastructure, including a bridge that once spanned the gap across Snow Creek. The concrete had crumbled, the metal supports twisted and broken, leaving a gaping void. Local residents had long since learned to avoid it. There were no barricades, no official warnings, just a gap in the road that plunged down into the water below. And yet, for almost a decade, Google Maps had not updated its data. The bridge still appeared as a valid safe crossing. So, now 9 years later, Phil kept driving his Jeep, confident in the road ahead. His GPS assured him he was on track. He probably assumed that just ahead the road dipped, maybe crossed over a narrow bridge. But as he neared the collapse, the pitch black night concealed everything. No reflective paint, no lights, no guardrails. By the time his headlights illuminated the drop, it was too late. The Jeep surged forward into nothingness. In that instant, the world must have exploded into chaos. The deafening crash of metal, the violent jolt of impact, the shattering of glass. The jeep plunged into Snow Creek, flipping and twisting as it fell. When the water settled, Phil was trapped inside, and there he lay. The next morning, Phil's body was discovered by a passerby, still inside the wreckage. When the news broke, it left the community stunned. People had been complaining about that bridge for years, warning that someone would eventually get hurt. They reached out to authorities and yet nothing had been done. And Google Maps? It had continued to direct drivers across that non-existent bridge without correction. In the days after his death, Phil's wife, Alicia, said something that cut deep. He was relying on Google Maps. He put his trust in it and led him to his death. His family filed a lawsuit, not just against Google, but also against the private property owners who were supposed to maintain the bridge. The legal filings revealed something chilling. Residents had reported the missing bridge to Google multiple times. One complaint had even been made weeks before Phil's death. But according to the lawsuit, those warnings went unanswered. Google later expressed deepest condolences and said it was reviewing the lawsuit. But the damage was done. A father was gone. 2 little girls were left without their dad. Phil Paxton's story is one of those tragedies that feel impossible. Like it shouldn't happen in a world with satellites, mapping technologies, and instant communication. But yet it did. Because the systems we trust blindly can sometimes be wrong, sometimes fatally wrong. If you trace the chain of events back to the start, there's nothing unusual. A dad leaves the party, pulls up a map, and drives home. But somewhere between that decision and the black, silent waters of Snow Creek, trust turned into a trap. Imagine sitting alone in a small kayak, hundreds of miles from shore. The ocean around you is endless, cold, and completely indifferent to whether you live or die. The waves tower over you, and the nearest person who could possibly help is days away, by plane. Now, imagine doing this for over a month straight, alone. No support boat, no safety net, just you and a 16-foot kayak in the middle of one of the most treacherous stretches of ocean on Earth. That was the challenge one man set for himself in early 2007. His name was Andrew McAuley, and his goal was as daring as it was deadly, to be the first person to kayak across the Tasman Sea. From Australia to New Zealand, that's over 1,000 miles of brutal, unpredictable ocean. So, what started as an ambitious adventure would turn into the most haunting maritime mysteries of modern time. And the most chilling part is, Andrew knew, long before he even launched, that this journey could kill him. Andrew wasn't reckless. By all accounts, he was intelligent, experienced, and methodical. He wasn't just some guy with a kayak and a death wish. Born in 1968, Andrew lived in Sydney, Australia, and worked as an IT consultant. But his true passion was extreme adventure. He spent years mountaineering, climbing dangerous peaks, and testing his limits in ways most people would never dream of. Then he fell in love with kayaking. And for Andrew, kayaking was about paddling on calm lakes or gentle rivers. It was about the raw, unpredictable power of the sea. He pushed himself harder and harder, completing long-distance solo journeys, including a 300-mile paddle along with the remote coast of Alaska. Friends said Andrew wasn't arrogant, but he was driven by a fascination with seeing how far the human body and mind could go. and eventually his eyes locked onto the Tasman Sea. If you look at a map, the Tasman Sea is the body of water separating Australia and New Zealand. At its narrowest point, it's about 1,200 miles wide. However, the numbers don't do it justice. The Tasman Sea is infamous among sailors. It's a violent, unpredictable stretch of ocean known for monstrous storms, freezing water, and swells that can reach 30 feet high. Commercial shipping vessels avoid it when the weather turns. Aircraft have vanished into it. And in a kayak, the Tasman isn't just dangerous, it's practically suicide. But Andrew believed it could be done. And not just that it could be done alone. To give him credit, this was not a normal kayak, like the ones you're used to seeing on a regular day at the beach. Andrew spent years preparing it. He modified his 16-foot kayak, which he named Casper. This wasn't a regular kayak anymore, as I said. It was part boat, part survival capsule. He reinforced the hull, added a canopy that could be sealed shut in storms, and packed it with desalination equipment, emergency beacons, navigation gear, food, and supplies. He trained relentlessly, paddling for hours each day, conditioning his body and running mental simulations for worst-case scenarios. In December 2006, Andrew made his first attempt. But just 24 hours into the journey, he had to turn back. The kayak proved to have a very dangerous flaw. Condensation was forming inside his cabin, soaking him in freezing conditions. And he realized that if he continued like this, he'd likely die of hypothermia. It was a bit frustrating, but instead of quitting, Andrew went back to the drawing board, made modifications, and prepared for another attempt. So on January 11, 2007, he set out again, this time for real. Andrew paddled out of Sandy Beach, Tasmania, washed by his wife, Vicky, and their young son, Finley. Andrew waved them goodbye while he started paddling off the shore. Per Andrew's account, the first few days were brutal. He faced strong winds, huge swells, and freezing nights. But Andrew was with high spirits and motivated because he was prepared. He recorded audio logs, sent back satellite messages, and reported his progress to his family and support team. Day after day, he paddled up to 12 hours straight, often resisting in the enclosed cockpit when the storms rolled through. He described the experience as relentless, but his spirits remained high. At one point, he reported dolphins following his kayak for miles. Another time, seabirds hovered overhead, almost as if keeping him company in the vast emptiness. And slowly, against all odds, Andrew was making progress. So, by now, it had been 2 weeks since Andrew started his journey, and he was exhausted. His hands were blistered, his back was in constant pain, and the mental toll was crushing. The Tasman Sea is not just physically demanding, it's psychologically punishing. Imagine the isolation. Nothing but water in every direction, no human voices, no rescue if something goes wrong. Every night, he sealed himself inside that tiny capsule, listening to the groaning sounds of his kayak being tossed by giant waves. By now, in his logs, he admitted to bouts of fear. He worried about capsizing in the middle of the night, or his kayak breaking apart. He wrote that some nights he wasn't sure if he'd wake up in the morning. And yet, against all odds, he kept going. By day 20, Andrew had passed the halfway point. He was bruised, battered, and sleep-deprived. But the finish line was in sight. In early February, Andrew was less than 100 miles from the New Zealand coast. After nearly a month at sea, he was so close to completing the impossible. He sent messages to his wife telling her he couldn't wait to see her and hold their son. His support crew prepared to greet him on land. Everyone was just so excited for Andrew. I mean, he was about to accomplish what no one else had ever done. Now, at this point, Andrew knew something that no one else did, and that was that the final stretch of this journey was the most dangerous of all. This because to reach New Zealand, he had to cross through area notorious for violent weather systems and powerful ocean currents. Around 2 weeks into February, so around February 9 or so, Andrew sent out a chilling and distressing satellite message. It just read, "Do not send a search party." So it was cryptic. No one knew what he meant. Was he saying he expected danger? Was it an attempt to reassure his family not to panic if he went dark? Or had something already gone wrong? So the next day, on February 10 at around 7:30 p.m., New Zealand's Rescue Coordination Centre received an emergency signal, and it came from the Tasman Sea, from Andrew's kayak. The team quickly sprung into action and they scrambled a search aircraft, which eventually located Andrew's kayak floating about 30 miles off the New Zealand coast. But the strange part was that Andrew wasn't inside. The cockpit canopy was missing. The kayak was damaged. Some of his gear was scattered, but Andrew himself was just gone. He was nowhere in sight. And the cabin was a small, waterproof voice recorder. On that recorder was Andrew's final transmission. His voice was weak, hoarse, but steady. And he said, "This is Andrew McAuley, calling for help. Over." He repeated it again and again. And then silence. Search teams scoured the area for days, but unfortunately, they found no trace of him. Experts believe Andrew's kayak capsized during the night. The canopy likely ripped away in the waves, exposing him to freezing water. If he was thrown out, hypothermia would have set in within minutes. Even if he made it back into the kayak without the canopy, survival was nearly impossible. And so, after 30 days at sea, within sight of land, Andrew vanished. He was just 30 miles from completing the impossible journey. Andrew's body was never found. His kayak, Casper, is now displayed in the Maritime Museum in New South Wales, Australia. Actually, to this day, adventurers debate whether Andrew's journey was an act of courage or recklessness. What no one disputes is his sheer willpower, his determination, and the haunting tragedy of how close he came. If you are still here, many thanks for watching, and again, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content. As you can see, this channel is just starting out, so please feel free to comment below with any suggestions or recommendations that you may have. I hope to see you at the next one.